My name is Mira Caldwell, and if you'd told me a year ago that my life would unravel in a single evening, I would have laughed and poured you a glass of wine. Back then, I believed in effort, in loyalty, in love. Back then, I believed in Logan Reyes. We met during a plumbing emergency cliché, I know. My ceiling was raining because the guy upstairs forgot to turn off his tub. Logan came to fix it. Tall, charming, with that boyish mess of hair and confidence that bordered on reckless. He smelled like cinnamon gum and drywall dust, told jokes, made me laugh, and kept coming back for repairs that mysteriously never ended. 3 years later, I was still the one patching things up, only now it wasn't just my ceiling. It was our relationship, our bills, his career, his ego. It was the night of our anniversary. 3 years. I had made reservations at Luzia's, one of those elegant rooftop restaurants that made you feel like a main character the moment you walked in. I'd saved for weeks, bought a new dress, even curled my hair, which I hated doing. Logan texted at 6:30, running late, be there soon, order something nice, love you. I got there at 7:00 p.m. sharp, sat by the window. The skyline looked perfect. I was nervous, hopeful, and alone. By 7:45, I'd ordered a glass of wine. Still no Logan. At 8:00, I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. At 8:30, the waitress gave me a look that felt like pity wrapped in politeness. I told her, he's just stuck in traffic. She smiled like she didn't believe me. Neither did I. At 8:55, the glass door swung open. Logan walked in with 4 of his friends, drunk, loud, laughing. Told you she'd still be here like a pathetic puppy, he said, and they all burst out laughing. My face burned. My throat tightened. One of his friends, Derek, the worst of the bunch, whistled. Damn, Logan, she really waited. She's trained. Logan sat beside me, squeezed my cheeks like I was a child. This is why you're the best, babe. Most chicks would have stormed out, but my Mira, she waits, pays my bills, and still looks hot doing it. I smiled. I ordered another drink. When the server came over, Logan waved her off. Don't bring her food. She's watching her figure. More laughter. I excused myself to the restroom. Inside, the first stared at myself in the mirror. No tears, just silence. Like my body had gone into some kind of freeze mode. 3 years. Over $12,000 paid on a stupid Mustang. Rent, groceries, emotional therapy sessions I never billed him for. I took a deep breath. I knew what I had to do. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled, walked back to the table, and kissed him on the cheek. I need to make a work call, I said. He barely noticed. Outside, I texted my best friend Jules. Pick me up in 10:10. Emergency. I'll explain later. I stopped by the server, quietly paid for my drinks. Told her the gentleman would handle the rest. Then I walked out. But that wasn't the end. That was the beginning. Because when I got into Jules's car, I didn't just leave Logan at that table. I left the old Mira there too. The girl who waited, the girl who paid, the girl who stayed quiet. She stayed. I left. And I was about to burn everything he thought he owned. I didn't cry. Not at first. After slipping out of the restaurant and into Maya's car, I just sat there, frozen. The cold leather pressed against my back, but I felt nothing. I stared ahead as the city lights blurred past us, thinking only one thing. He planned that. 3 years. Thousands of dollars. And Emery's had planned to humiliate me laughing with his friends, calling me his loyal mutt like it was a punchline. Maya said nothing for a while. She just drove, gave me space. I think that's why we've stayed friends for so long. She always knew when silence was the real comfort. When we got to her place, I walked in like a ghost. Mascara streaked my cheeks. My dress, which hours ago made me feel beautiful, now felt like a costume, like I dressed up for a part in a cruel play. I didn't audition for. Sit, Maya said gently, placing a blanket around my shoulders and handing me a tub of cookie dough ice cream. I took it numbly, and then I broke. Ugly, shuddering sobs. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the spoon. Maya didn't say anything. She just sat beside me, resting her hand on mine, and waited for the storm to pass. It didn't, not fully. But eventually, I could breathe again. I paid off his entire car, I whispered. He didn't even say thank you. Maya nodded. I know. I stayed at her place that night. Couldn't go back. Not to our apartment. The one I paid rent for. The one where Emery's slept in while I worked overtime. The one where I folded his laundry and left sweet notes in his lunchbox because I thought love meant giving. The next morning, something in me clicked. No more crying. I had all the ammunition I needed. Years of it, stored away in Telegram voice messages, saved text threads, screenshots. I had Emery's digital fingerprints on every lie, every insult, every moment of manipulation. And most importantly, I had access. His bank account, his email, his job's internal portal he'd begged me to fill in some HR forms once and left himself logged in. His cloud storage, where I discovered he wasn't just mocking me behind my back. He was cheating. Her name was Alina. There were messages, selfies, voice notes of him laughing, calling me a bridge to get across a rough patch in life. He never expected I'd find out. But I did. The car. His precious, too expensive, overcompensating for something sports car. I called the bank first. Told them the last payment I'd made needed to be reversed fraudulent charges under manipulation. I had the texts and voice messages to prove it. The bank listened. They paused the payment pending investigation. Then I logged into his Spotify account, changed the password, deleted his playlists. Netflix, gone. His gym membership, canceled. But that wasn't even the real damage. The voice clips the ones where he called his boss a walking aneurysm with a god complex, or sent to said boss, anonymously. I found the email on his cloud resume files. Along with a few less than appropriate jokes about the HR manager, I included those too. His parents got a separate package. Remember? Emery's once called his mom a doormat in pearls, and his dad a spineless worm who should have retired into oblivion. I thought they deserved to hear that in their own son's voice. Within 24 hours, Emery's world began to crumble. Back at the apartment, I went into purge mode. I gathered everything he owned. Clothes, shoes, gadgets, even his childhood box of memories he never let me touch. I packed them into black trash bags, all 17 of them. Then I called a friend with a truck. We drove to the city dump. No hesitation. I watched them fall into the compactor, one by one, and it felt cleansing. I wasn't erasing him. I was freeing me. I left the key under the doormat, changed the locks, left a note taped to the door, "Your stuff's where your respect for me has always been buried." The next day, Emery's boss emailed me thanking me. He'd suspected Emery's was a ticking time bomb, but never had proof. Now he did. Later, HR followed up. They were pursuing internal disciplinary measures. Translation, he was out. Emery's called me 37 times. Left voicemails that swung from teary apologies to rage-fueled rants. I didn't listen to them, just forwarded a few to my lawyer friend. Because yes, I was already protecting myself legally. Then the Instagram posts started. Vague apologies, inspirational quotes about growth through pain, and a DM from Alina, the other girl. "Did you really throw out all his stuff?" I replied with a photo of the garbage truck. Blocked. The dominoes fell fast. His car, repossessed. His job, gone. His friends? Some started DMing me, apologizing for laughing that night. Others defended him until I sent them screenshots of the texts where he called them backup clowns. His parents? Furious. Cut off support. Even his brother messaged me to ask me out. I laughed for the first time in days. I didn't need revenge. I needed truth. So I handed it to the world Emery's own words, his own choices. And when I checked my bank app and saw the reversed payment was officially back in my account, I poured myself a glass of wine, curled up on Maya's couch, and said out loud, "He messed with the wrong woman." It's strange how fast a life can collapse. Even stranger when you're the one pulling the trigger. By the time Emery's voicemail stopped ringing, I'd already scrubbed him from every corner of my life. Phone? Blocked. Social media? Nuked. Shared cloud drives? Deleted. I stood in the center of my once shared apartment, now an echo chamber, and listened to the silence. The emptiness felt good, clean, like I had finally opened all the windows and let the poison out. But deep down, I knew the storm wasn't over. It was just repositioning. The next morning, A knock shook my door at 7 a.m. I looked through the peephole. Jake, Emery's #1 cheerleader. The same guy who laughed the loudest at that restaurant, who raised his glass when Emery's called me a loyal mutt. He was holding something in his hand. A folder? I didn't answer. Instead, I listened. "Look, Elia," Jake began, his voice lower than usual. "I didn't know Emery's was gonna pull that crap at the dinner. I swear, I thought it was just a prank. Not whatever the hell that was." I leaned closer to the door, silent. "He's crashing on my couch," Jake continued. "He's losing it. Keeps saying you ruined his life. But what?" "I found this," he said, slipping something under the door. A single page, folded in half. I waited 5 minutes before picking it up. A printout of an email sent from Emery's to someone named Harrison Kane. I had no idea who that was. But the subject line made my heart stutter. The Elia insurance plan. I read the body once, then twice. My hands started shaking. Let her keep paying. She thinks she's building a future. Really, she's just my temporary ATM. If she finds out before the refinance goes through, I'll flip the narrative. She's emotionally unstable, there's receipts. There were more lines, worse lines. He had planned it, all of it. The anniversary dinner, the smearing campaign, even a fake story for HR if I ever went public text templates where he painted me as a manipulative, controlling girlfriend who monitored his accounts and gaslit him. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a setup. I sat at my kitchen counter for hours. The world outside kept moving, but mine had frozen mid-frame. I was shaking, yes, but not with fear, with clarity. He didn't just disrespect me. He tried to destroy me silently, methodically. He had insurance plans, backup narratives, and pre-written lies, all while I was planning our future and paying off his dreams. That's when I decided Emery's wasn't going to just lose his things, his job, or his car. He was going to lose his mask. I started with Telegram. I knew Emery's hadn't changed his passwords. He was lazy that way. There, I found archived chats between him and Harrison, the mysterious recipient of that email. Turns out Harrison was a lawyer friend, shady type, used burner numbers, dabbled in reputation recovery. They'd been drafting messages to send to HR, to mutual friends, even to my own workplace. Elia's been threatening me. She stole from me. She's emotionally erratic. My heart dropped, then hardened. I downloaded everything, forwarded it to Maya, who immediately said, "This is actual premeditated defamation." Then I called someone I never thought I'd reach out to, Joanne, Emery's ex. She'd once messaged me a year ago, just a single warning, "Be careful with him." I hadn't replied. Now I owe her a conversation. Joanne agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway across town. She looked tired, hollow in a familiar way. The moment I said Emery's name, she nodded. I figured it had come to this. She told me everything, how he had isolated her, convinced her family she was unstable, trashed her reputation after she left, even got her fired by tipping off her boss with half-truths that painted her as unreliable. "He's a master manipulator," she said, staring into her coffee. "But it always catches up." I shared the email, the Telegram messages. She blinked. He's still doing the same playbook. Word for word. We made a plan. She had evidence too. Emails, recordings, even a therapy report she had never submitted, fearing it would be used against her. Together, we compiled a dossier, a real one. On a private Reddit forum I posted anonymously, a detailed breakdown of everything: the manipulation, the abuse, the restaurant incident, the financial control, the fraudulent car payments, the voice notes, the emails, screenshots, audio clips, links to verified sources, even Joanne's statement. Within hours, the post exploded. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments. Other women came forward. A bartender he once dated, a cousin's friend, a coworker, pattern of behavior. That phrase started trending on the thread. It wasn't just a toxic relationship anymore. It was a documented history of coercion, exploitation, and reputational destruction. Emery's carefully crafted image was unraveling and fast. 3 days later, Maya sent me a text. "He's live on Instagram." I opened the link. There he was. Dark circles under his eyes. Greasy hair, no filters, no bravado. He rambled about being misunderstood, about fake stories, about a campaign to ruin him. He never once said my name. But everyone knew. The comments were relentless. "Apologize. You used her. You're disgusting. She's better off." He ended the stream in tears. I didn't watch past that. Closure wasn't watching him break. Closure was knowing he'd never have control again. A week later, I got a call from HR at my job. They had received a complaint about me, anonymous, poorly written, accusing me of emotional instability. I smiled. I sent them the entire thread of screenshots from Emery's and Harrison's email exchange. He thanked me, then said something that stuck. "You handled this with more professionalism than most people ever could." That night, I lit a candle, played my favorite vinyl record, cooked dinner for one. It was quiet, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like peace. They say, silence is golden. But after weeks of nothing from Emery's, no notes, no voicemails, not even a burner account ping, I found out something unsettling. Silence isn't golden. It's suspicious. It was a rainy Thursday when I found out exactly why. My phone buzzed with a blocked number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something told me to answer. "Miss Elia Voss?" a man's voice asked. Calm, clipped, legal. "Yes, this is Damien Cordell, legal counsel representing Mr. Emery's Falco. I'd like to inform you that my client intends to pursue civil litigation for defamation, property damage, and intentional emotional distress." I almost laughed. "I'm sorry, you're calling to say he's suing me for exposing what he did?" "Our position," he said dryly, "is that your public sharing of private communications, as well as the destruction of his personal property, constitutes both libel and malicious intent." I hung up. I wasn't going to get into it with a voice on the line who probably didn't even know the full story. Or worse, knew everything and didn't care. I called Maya immediately. "Let him," she said without even hesitating. "We have mountains of evidence, voice notes, screenshots, witnesses." Hell, I'll testify myself. So would Joanne. This isn't a lawsuit, it's desperation. But still, the pit in my stomach tightened. Emery's wasn't trying to win. He was trying to intimidate, to remind me that even without a car, a home, or a job, he could still make me afraid. It's funny how the universe throws people at you when you least expect it. His name was Theo. And no, this wasn't some rebound romance waiting to unfold. He was a fire marshal, came by my building to do an annual safety inspection. It was his third visit that day, and he was visibly frustrated because a tenant had left a pot of rice burning on the stove and set off the entire system. My hallway smelled like scorched jasmine. "I'm sorry about the mess," he muttered while scribbling something on his clipboard. "Some folks just don't understand fire codes." I smiled politely, about to close my door, but then he paused. "Sorry," he said again, eyes flicking up. "Have we met before?" "Doubt it." "Right, you just look like someone who's been through a fire." I blinked. He realized how that sounded and laughed, cheeks turning crimson. I meant metaphorically. "Bad breakup, maybe?" I laughed too. "You have no idea." He gave me a card before leaving. Said his sister ran a small support group for women who had gone through high-control relationships. I didn't call. Not yet. But I kept the card. A week after the lawyer call, I got another surprise. Joanne forwarded me a screenshot from a Facebook page Emery's had created. A blog about me. He was calling it "A Wolf in Sheepskin." My story as if the past 3 years of exploitation, deceit, and manipulation had somehow been my fault. He didn't mention my name directly, but the timeline and photos made it obvious. There were pictures from our anniversary dinner. A caption that read, "She smiled, drank wine, and left me with the bill." My birthday. My humiliation. Birthday? He had twisted it. Suddenly, I was a vindictive ex who'd abandoned her loving partner during a celebration. Comments poured in. Some strangers offered support. But a few? They were venomous. One called me a gold digger. Another said, "This chick is emotionally abusive and dangerous. Who walks out like that on someone they love?" It burned. But I didn't reply. I documented everything, screenshotted every comment, logged every IP from the site using a tool Maya gave me. I was done playing defense. It was time to go public. I reached out to my friend Savi, who managed a podcast focused on relationships and toxic recovery stories. She had once offered me a slot, back when I was still whispering my story into voicemail drafts and therapy journals. This time, I was ready. The episode dropped on a Friday morning. We called it The Anniversary That Ended Everything. The first told my story, calmly, clearly, with dates, facts, and receipts. I never once mentioned his full name, but the audience pieced it together. Especially when they matched his blog timeline with mine. The episode exploded. 50 listens in 24 hours. Then, 100 kek. Other women came forward, some with screenshots, some with old voicemails. One woman said she knew Emery's back in college, and he used to run tests on women to see how loyal they'd be under pressure. Another said he ghosted her after borrowing money. Pattern of behavior. There it was again. Within days, Emery's blog vanished. So did his Instagram. I got a voicemail from the same lawyer who's called me before. This time, his tone was different. "Miss Boss," he began, "my client has asked me to retract previous litigation intentions. We will not be pursuing any legal action at this time." Translation? He knew he lost. I had the truth, the facts, the community behind me. He had a pile of lies and a trail of women with broken hearts and deleted bank transfers. I finally called Theo's sister. Her name was Bryn, and her group was small, just 8 women. We met every Thursday in the back of a yoga studio that smelled faintly like incense and lavender oil. I didn't say much the first night, but I listened. And when I did speak, I said something that surprised even me. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "I'm just disappointed in who I became, in how long I stayed, in how little I thought of myself." Bryn smiled and said, "That's where it always starts, the unlearning." I moved apartments again, smaller, quieter, facing a park where I take walks every morning with the cat I adopted, Nova. I still get the occasional message from strangers who found my story on the podcast or Reddit. Some ask if I'd ever talk to Emery's again. No. That version of me, the girl who waited in a wine-stained dress for a man to laugh in her face, is gone. And she's never coming back. People always talk about moving on like it's a straight road. Like you wake up one day, stretch, and say, "Cool, I'm over it now." Let me tell you, it's not a road, it's a mountain. And I was still somewhere halfway up, breathless, knees scraped, hands shaking but climbing anyway. It had been 3 months since Emery's collapse. Since the voice notes, the podcast, the dump drop. Since I stopped letting someone else define my worth. But peace didn't come wrapped in a bow. It came slowly, and with surprises. It was a Wednesday night. Rain pelted the window like it was trying to confess something. Nova, my cat, my little shadow, sat curled beside me as I flipped through mail. Most of it was junk. But then, a letter, no return address. Just my name, written in sharp, blocky handwriting that looked like it was biting the paper. I should have tossed it, but curiosity wins over caution every time. Inside was a single sheet, typed. No signature. You think you won. You think a podcast makes you a saint. But lies have long legs, Elia. And one day they'll run back to you. No name, no proof, just veiled threats and ego. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled. Because scared people send anonymous letters. The dangerous ones don't warn you. They just act. I filed the letter in a red folder labeled "Just in Case." My lawyer's number was already saved in my phone. 2 years ago, I would have collapsed from this. Now, I was fireproof. Her name was Mira. She messaged me through a burner Instagram. No profile picture. No posts. Just a DM, "I think we need to talk." About Emery's. One ignored it at first. Then another message came. "He told me you were crazy, that you hacked him, that you stalked him after a miscarriage." I stopped breathing for a second. Not because any of it was true, but because it was new. He had never used that word with me before. Miscarriage. A lie so low it cut through the marrow. I replied. She wasn't some spiteful ex or a troll. She was his new girlfriend for a few weeks anyway. She had ended it after finding his truth blog still saved in a Dropbox folder. She asked for the podcast link. I sent it. The next day, she messaged again. I listened. Every minute. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. Neither did she. But her next message? That stopped me cold. He said something once, during a fight, about Thief Archive. Do you know what that is? No. But I was about to. It took 3 hours. 3 hours. Digging through old folders and passwords and drives I hadn't touched since I left the shared apartment. But there it was, hidden deep in a cloud backup tied to Emery's old email, the one I'd used when helping him build a resume once. A folder called Nova Ironic. Considering my cat now shares that name, inside were recordings. Hundreds. Not just the voice notes he'd sent me, but ones he'd recorded of me. Me crying after losing a promotion. Me talking to Maya on speakerphone. Me laughing on our anniversary before he arrived late. He had been recording me for years, and he'd never told me. I called my lawyer the next morning. We met that afternoon in a small office with blue blinds and coffee that tasted like it had given up on life. I played the audio. He listened quietly, then asked one question. Did he ever inform you were being recorded? No, he nodded. Then we're in business. Because Illinois, where we lived, was a two-party consent state. That meant recording someone without their knowledge or consent was a crime. He told me we could file a civil suit, that it wouldn't be about money, it'd be about setting a record straight. I asked for a day to think, not because I wasn't sure, but because I needed to remind myself, was this revenge or justice? Later that night, I wrote in my journal, it's not about what he took. It's about reclaiming what he thought I'd never notice was missing my story. You'd think family would always believe in you. You'd think blood buys loyalty. But when Emery's mother called again, she was crying. And not for me. I don't understand, she sobbed. He was such a good boy. What happened? I said nothing. She filled the silence. He's different now. Angry. Paranoid. Says he's being followed. Says you ruined his life. I nearly laughed. Ruined? No. I just stopped protecting him from himself. She begged me not to press charges. Said it would destroy him. I hung up without answering and changed my number. I didn't expect to see him again. But life loves irony. It was late October. The leaves were rusted gold and blood red, and I had just picked up coffee on my way to the new studio space Maya and I rented. That's when I saw him, Emery's, outside the corner deli. He looked broken. Thinner, tired, jacket hanging off him like it didn't belong. He saw me. Our eyes met. He didn't smile. He walked straight up, close enough for my chest to tighten. Elia, he said, quiet. I didn't respond. He looked down, then muttered, Are you really gonna go through with it? I tilted my head. Go through with what? The lawsuit. Ah, so that's what this was. I sipped my coffee. Did you ever ask me for permission before recording me? He said nothing. I'm not doing this to ruin you, I continued. I'm doing it so people know the truth. About what you did, not what you pretend happened. He tried to smirk. It didn't land. You loved me once, he whispered. Maybe, I said. But I love me now. That's the difference. I walked away. He didn't follow. We didn't end up in court. He settled, quietly, privately. The recordings were destroyed. A written apology was signed. He agreed to never contact me again. But the real victory? That came in the messages. From women, from men, from strangers, saying, I left because of you. I spoke up because of your story. Thank you for reminding me I'm not crazy. That's the power of telling the truth. Even when your voice shakes, even when they try to write your story for you, I still have the red folder. I keep it in a fireproof box, not out of fear, but out of principle. It's a reminder that there was once a version of me who thought love meant silence, meant shrinking, meant staying. That version of me is gone. She was brave, but I am braver. Because now I know the people who want to dim your light, they're terrified of what happens when you finally burn. 6 months. It's been 6 months since I last heard his name out loud. 6 months since I looked over my shoulder or checked my peephole. 6 months since I stopped expecting apologies that would never come. And in that silence, I found something unexpected. Peace. Not the kind that hits you all at once with fireworks and fanfare. No, this was slow. Like healing. Like sunlight filtering through thick clouds you forgot were even there. I wake up now without flinching at phantom notifications. I sip my coffee from the mug. I bought on a solo trip to Portland. It's got a cat on it. Nova approves. My mornings are mine. Miss Space is mine. My silence is sacred. Every now and then, a memory will nudge its way in, like that night at the restaurant. The ache, the sting, the slow, suffocating horror of betrayal in front of strangers. But it doesn't hurt the same. Now I look back and whisper, she got out. I did. Funny how healing became contagious. After my story aired, more voices followed. Strangers, friends of friends, coworkers they reached out. One girl said her boyfriend had always made jokes about her weight in front of his friends. Another said she'd been guilt-tripped into paying off her partner's gambling debt. Different details. Same poison. Every single one of them ended with the same sentence. Hearing you speak gave me the courage to leave. That's when I realized my story wasn't just a fallout, it was a blueprint for walking away, for taking back your name, for becoming the author again. Last week, I opened my inbox and found a message titled, About Emery's. My stomach dropped, but I opened it. It was from his ex-coworker, someone who had also received one of the infamous recordings. Turns out, Emery's had tried to land a new job in another city using a fake reference letter claimed he left his last job voluntarily. But the HR team had Googled. The podcast showed up, the Reddit thread, the screenshots, the trail. He didn't get the job. I didn't smile. Not out of pity, but because I didn't care anymore. That's how I knew I was free. Some people asked me if I ever forgave him. The truth? I forgave myself first, for staying too long, for trusting too much, for dimming myself to keep someone else comfortable. Forgiving him? That's trickier. It's not about letting him off the hook. It's about cutting the hook from my own skin. I don't hate him. I just don't carry him anymore. 2 nights ago, I had a dream. I was standing in a field of sunflowers. The sky was deep purple, the kind that only shows up in dreams or after a storm. Emery's was there. He looked the same, but smaller. He tried to speak. I turned and walked away. That was it. I woke up feeling lighter. Some goodbyes don't need words. Today, I stood in front of a room full of people, real people, not usernames, and told my story. It was a small event, part of a local support group for women leaving emotionally manipulative relationships. I wasn't a guest speaker, I wasn't a therapist, I was just Elia, a woman who once mistook control for love and learned better. They asked me what I would say to someone still in that place, still waiting, still hoping, still being diminished by someone who promised the moon and delivered ash. This is what I said. You don't have to wait until they hit you to leave. Emotional bruises don't show up in X-rays, but they still bleed. The first time you feel yourself shrinking to be loved, that's the moment to go. My apartment is different now. The couch is in a new corner. The air feels lighter. The art on the wall? All mine. There are no garbage bags by the door. No shadow haunting the kitchen. No phone buzzing with cruelty dressed as charm. Just me and Nova. And the quiet hum of a life that feels like mine again. If you're reading this and see yourself in me, please know you're not overreacting. You're not too sensitive. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for respect, which is the bare minimum, not a luxury. You don't need a podcast to prove you were hurt. You don't need a court case to validate your pain. You only need one thing: permission to save yourself. And here it is, I give it to you. Go. Run if you have to. Walk if that's all you can manage. Crawl if you're broken. But leave. Then one day, like me, you'll write your ending. Not his. Story 2. My fiancé told me he wasn't sure he wanted to marry me after 5 years of dating. Then he made a joke in front of his friends. I would marry you if you were prettier. His mother contacted me crying this morning. I've been dating Dominic for a little more than 5 years, and we got engaged 8 months ago. We met at a housewarming party through mutual acquaintances. Just 2 individuals who are drawn to one other's love of 90s cartoons and dislike of IPAs. We dated for a year, moved in together after 2, adopted our cat Beans at 3, and got engaged last summer. Our relationship developed at a leisurely pace. He anxiously fumbled the ring box out of his pocket as he proposed a simple Saturday morning stroll to our favorite viewing point. I instantly responded yes. We have been carefully organizing everything and have picked the date for this October. He nodded along as I mostly planned. Dominic started saying strange things when we talked about wedding arrangements around 3 months ago. Not entirely bad, but apprehensive. He would remark, "That's a lot of money for just one day," when I showed him possible locations. Or is it really necessary to invite everyone? I dismissed it as budgetary worries or just normal man behavior. Next followed the tardy replies to my SMS on wedding-related matters. Hours later, he would respond with "just looks fine" or "anything you wanted" when I offered him alternatives for caterers. I inquired as to if everything was well. "I was just busy at work," he would explain. It made sense because his construction firm had taken on some large projects. He began hanging out more with Paul, a coworker, last month. After work, they go to Paul's apartment to watch games or have drinks. Nothing out of the ordinary again. Simply more often than previously. He appeared aloof, checked his phone more frequently, and showed less affection when he got home. I tried discussing it with Lena, my best friend. She advised that we have a date night to catch up and that we experience pre-wedding nerves. I thus booked appointments at this brand new Italian restaurant downtown last Friday. I put on a lovely dress, not an expensive one, but one I hadn't worn in a long time, and even got Dominic his favorite beer to keep in the refrigerator. The date night didn't work out. During dinner, he appeared preoccupied and hardly spoke when I mentioned completing our honeymoon arrangements. The bomb was dropped by him. He wasn't certain that he was prepared for everything. The wedding, the marriage, the honeymoon, everything. I was taken aback. He had been with her for 5 years, had been engaged for 8 months, and was now unsure. He brought up Paul's brother's tumultuous divorce and talks with Paul about how marriage changes things when I pressed him. As I felt like my life was falling apart and tried not to make a scene in the restaurant, the conversation swiftly got out of hand. Our entrees were hardly touched. There was a lot of stress on the quiet trip home, in our flat. He avoided more discussion by claiming that he needed time to reflect before dozing off on the couch. The next morning was excruciatingly uncomfortable. Like strangers sharing an Airbnb, we maneuvered around one another. He talked about going to the Rusty Nail, a sports pub downtown, for lunch with Paul and a few coworkers to watch the game. I couldn't fight because I was too emotionally spent. Lena called a few hours later and persuaded me to leave the flat. After we had coffee, I unpacked everything. Lena calmly listened, speculating that perhaps Dominique was simply feeling anxious before the wedding. We went aimlessly around Target after coffee, my go-to stress-relieving exercise. Retail therapy is still therapy, so I purchased some new shampoo and some superfluous throw pillows. I felt more at ease by the early evening and made the decision to go home. I received a text from Kyler, a coworker of Dominic's that I had met at the office Christmas party. As I was coming into our apartment complex, the message inquired about my well-being, mentioning that the Rusty Nail was a strange place. Rather of messaging Kyler back, I gave him a call. At first, unwilling to divulge facts to some pushing, he sounded uneasy. At last, he disclosed the events. When Paul questioned Dominic if he was ready to be with one lady forever, Dominic voiced worries about the timing of the wedding, and the boys had been making fun of him for the wedding preparations. Paul inquired as to what was preventing him. Apparently intoxicated, Dominic stated something along the lines of, "I would be more excited to marry you if you were prettier." Then, as if it were a joke, he laughed it off. Kyler informed me that after he and a few other men criticized Dominic for the remark, Dominic simply became defensive and said they couldn't handle a joke. After that call, I spent 20 minutes sobbing while sitting in my car. The man I believed loved me for 5 years had made a public jest about his reluctance to marry me because of my appearance. When I eventually entered, still dressed from earlier, Dominic lay unconscious on the couch. The scent of old beer filled the flat. I locked the door after bringing beans into the bedroom. I awoke on Sunday morning to the aroma of bacon and coffee. Dominic, a typical apology breakfast. He seemed apologetic and hungover, obviously expecting that food would make things better. His face plummeted when I questioned him about what Kyler had told me. He attempted to minimize it right away, saying he was inebriated and foolish. He claims that he muttered something stupid to silence the guys who were making fun of him for being restrained. It was made worse by his justification of males being dudes. He insisted it was not his purpose when we battled over how he could make fun of me in front of his buddies. I couldn't get over the idea that he would use my appearance as the subject of a nasty joke, even though he attempted to explain that he was anxious about the pressure and expenses of the wedding. I was unable to live with him in the flat. I went to Elliot's apartment after grabbing my handbag. In difficult times, my brother has always been my haven. He was incensed when I told him what had transpired, all set to take on Dominic head-on. By telling him that I simply needed time and a place to stay while I worked things out, I was able to calm him down. Dominic continued to text throughout Sunday, apologizing and saying that he was happy to come home and speak. I only replied once, stating that I needed more time. On Monday, I phoned in ill to work, unable to pretend that everything was normal while taking phone calls at the dentist office. Around 9 a.m., Dominic's mother, Valerie, called me on Monday morning. We've always had a good relationship. Compared to my own mother, who resides in Florida with her third husband, she has been more encouraging of our relationship. She seemed upset, indicating that she wanted to know something vital since Dominic had contacted her the previous evening. She asked if we could get together for a conversation. I'm currently sitting in my car outside the coffee shop where I have a 15-minute appointment with Valerie, thinking what else I could possibly need to know. Additionally, my 5-year relationship may be ended. I never imagined that I would write this post. I can't stop staring at my engagement ring and thinking whether I should have anticipated this. Did things truly shift that abruptly? Or was I just blind? Do I want to listen to Valerie? What on earth could she say me to make any of this acceptable? Update first. I appreciate everyone's tremendous support of my initial post. Thousands of comments surprised me. Between sobbing fits and stress eating the emergency Oreos from my brother's cabinet, I made an effort to read as many as I could. To answer your question, I did have a meeting with Dominic's mother, Valerie. I'll discuss it at the conclusion of this update. I'm still absorbing everything that has transpired in the past 2 days. I phoned in ill to work once more after posting on Monday. My supervisor was sympathetic. Apparently, I sounded like death on the phone, yet I've only taken 2 sick days in the last year. Elliot's unadorned room, which doubled as a storage closet, was where I spent the majority of the morning. Around midday, Lena stopped by on her lunch break with sandwiches from the deli beside the hospital where she works, and I was trying to think while reading through your comments. I was not hungry, but I made myself take a few pieces because I hadn't eaten much since Sunday. Lena gently pointed me that I couldn't stay away from Dominic indefinitely. We had shared accounts, lived together, and would ultimately have to speak. She was correct. I couldn't hide at my brother's house forever, of course, especially since Elliot's girlfriend was coming over for dinner that evening. Being the depressed third wheel at their Taco Tuesday was the last thing I wanted. After Lena departed, I stole one of Elliot's sweatshirts and showered. Don't pass judgment. It drove back to my flat and was reassuring. I practiced what I wanted to say all the way there. I refrained from shouting. I had no intention of crying. I was going to seek answers while remaining composed and grown up. I saw Dominic's pickup when I pulled into our parking space. He ought to have been at his job. As I ascended the stairs to our second-floor apartment, my stomach knotted. He was sweating and appeared to have not slept when I unlocked the door and found him on the couch. Surrounded by folders I've gathered over the past 8 months for wedding preparation. Beans, the little merchant, was cuddled up next to him. I asked him why he wasn't at work, and he appeared shocked and relieved to see me. He talked about having personal time. It seems that he had been going over all of the wedding preparations, trying to find out how he had made such a big mistake. I informed him that looking at wedding arrangements wouldn't change what he had said, and I stayed by the door, not ready to sit close to him. A protracted and challenging discussion ensued. He expressed regret once more for the bar remark, saying he didn't even believe it and that it was unacceptable. I questioned him about why he would state something he didn't think was true. I became even more irate when he clarified that he was attempting to be cool in front of his pals. I reminded him that even while sober, he had voiced misgivings about our wedding, and I brought up his remarks from the supper before the bar incident. He acknowledged that he was anxious about a number of things, including our wedding money, horror stories, hall content, his marriage, and a work project that was running behind time. However, he kept these worries to himself until they burst in the most worst way conceivable, rather than discussing them with me. As our discussion went on, he disclosed a new dread of being like his father. Dominic seldom ever mentioned his father, who moved to Arizona to establish a new family after having an affair with a coworker when he was 12. Dominic now acknowledged that he was concerned about having some hereditary tendency to betray or desert his family, even if he had always maintained that it had no bearing on how much. I emphasized that he wasn't his father and that decisions about relationships aren't influenced by heredity. His answer was instructive. Given what he had seen as a child, he questioned if he could truly pledge forever, as it felt so unattainable. He paused before acknowledging that he had been talking to Kyler occasionally when I asked whether he had expressed his thoughts with anybody else. Since Kyler joined the firm, they had apparently become closer, and Kyler had also experienced some relationship difficulties. I made a connection between this and Kyler's call on the BART incident. He was well aware of Dominic's skepticism. When I questioned Dominic about his feelings, the conversation took yet another challenging turn. He gave a terribly honest response. Despite liking me, they are afraid, stressed, and unsure about getting married. He clarified that he was afraid of causing the same thing to happen with us, since he kept thinking about how his parents were content until they abruptly stopped being so. I questioned why he hadn't expressed these emotions before. "I'm afraid," he said. "He didn't love me enough, in my opinion." I didn't miss the irony. He made the exact situation he was trying to avoid by keeping his fears to himself. He maintained that he had always thought I was attractive when I asked if his joke about my appearance was genuinely motivated by attraction. He brought up the housewarming party where we first met, bringing up specifics about his awful beer pong skills and my green sweater. He claimed that the remark was the result of insecurity and a foolish attempt to appear in control rather than trapped in front of his friends. As we continued our conversation, I posed an important query: were his reservations about marriage in general, or about marrying me in particular? I could tell everything about his hesitation before responding. He eventually acknowledged that, although marriage and commitment were the main sources of his anxieties, he also questioned whether we would be a good long-term match. The look wasn't as painful as this. Even after 5 years of dating, he continued to question whether we were a good fit. He talked about how we had both changed since our early 20s when I asked him for details. In contrast to my previous spontaneity, I now need to plan more. His aspirations to launch his own company were shelved, although I pointed out that growth and change are normal in relationships. He questioned whether we'd grown together or apart. By this point, I felt emotionally drained. I told him I needed time away to process everything: his public humiliation, his hidden doubts, and now his uncertainty about our compatibility. He pleaded for us to work through it together, offering to try therapy or couple counseling, but I remained firm about needing space. As I was about to pack more clothes, he mentioned my phone had been buzzing. I checked and saw 3 missed calls from Valerie. With everything happening, I had completely forgotten our planned coffee meeting. When I mentioned this to Dominic, his expression changed to confusion, then concern. He asked what his mom wanted to talk about, and I explained. She called crying the previous morning, saying she needed to discuss something important after his Sunday night call to her. His reaction was telling. The color drained from his face, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. When I asked what he told her, he vaguely mentioned their fight and his doubts, but his evasiveness made me suspicious. When pressed further, he said it wasn't his place to explain and suggested I should hear whatever it was from his mom directly. I stepped away to call Valerie back. She answered immediately, concerned when I hadn't shown up for our meeting. I explained I was at the apartment talking with Dominic. She mentioned having something important to tell me and suggested meeting right away. Her voice sounded strained when I mentioned being with Dominic, further increasing my suspicion that there was something significant I didn't know. After arranging to meet Valerie in 30 minutes, I confronted Dominic again, asking what his mother knew that I didn't. He finally looked up, his expression a mix of guilt and resignation. He said there was something he should have told me himself, and suggested I talk to his mom, offering to be gone when I returned, if that's what I wanted. I quickly packed enough clothes for a week, along with toiletries and my laptop at the door. Dominic said he loved me, but I responded that sometimes love isn't enough. On my way to meet Valerie, Karina, Dominic's sister, called. She was clearly concerned, asking what was happening between Dominic and me. She mentioned hearing from Paul about the bar incident and noted that Dominic wasn't answering her text while our mom seemed upset. When I explained I was heading to meet Valerie, Karina seemed surprised and asked if the meeting was about Maria. The name hit me like a truck. "What about Maria?" I inquired. Karina's shocked reaction and quick backpedaling told me she'd accidentally revealed something important. She apologized and urged me to hear Valerie out, refusing to explain further despite my urging. As I pulled into the coffee shop parking lot, I observed Valerie already waiting at a table by the window. Her eyes were red-ringed and swollen. Whatever she was about to tell me, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. My phone rang with a text as I headed approaching her table. It was from Dominic. "Whatever my mom says you, please remember that I do love you. I just became afraid and made bad blunders. I'll understand if you can't forgive me." I put my phone aside, took a big breath, and sat down across from Valerie. Second update. Thank you everybody for the support on my earlier post. Reading your remarks has been both reassuring and overwhelming. I haven't been able to answer to many, but please know I've read them and I appreciate the advice. I'm writing this from a new place, Lena's flat. Yesterday's encounter with Valerie left me unable to bear returning to our flat, or Elliot's. Elliot's futon in the storage room is somewhat less comfy than Lena's pull-out sofa. In addition, her cat Pepper doesn't think I'm bad for sobbing into my porridge at 2 a.m. That brings us to Valerie's meeting. How do I even begin? Even for a Tuesday afternoon, the coffee shop was packed. The majority of tables were taken by laptop using students from a nearby community college that had recently canceled classes. Valerie had succeeded in landing a corner booth, the high-backed ones that at least give the appearance of seclusion. 3 weeks ago, when I last saw her at our monthly family meal, she looked different. She had no makeup on, and her normally flawless bob was a little unkempt. I've known her for 5 years. Valerie always wears lipstick and mascara, at the very least. She isn't conceited. She just does it every day. For example, some individuals cannot begin their day without coffee. She got up to give me a hug when I got there. Her scent was reminiscent of the lavender dryer sheets she invariably uses. I really wanted one of those delicious caramel coffees with extra whipped cream, but I settled for a black coffee instead. Ordering anything trivial for this talk felt inappropriate somehow. Valerie reached the stage where Dominic had contacted her on Sunday night in a full-blown emotional outburst following some awkward small conversation. She agreed that he had legitimate concerns about becoming his father and being committed. His actions were the result of something far more urgent. "Maria, my coffee almost suffocated me," Valerie stated, anxiously tearing a napkin into little bits that the woman had mentioned a few times in passing Maria, the new project coordinator at Dominic's firm. Over the last few months, Dominic had grown fond of Maria. At least Dominic informed his mother that nothing physical had occurred. However, there was an emotional bond that made him doubt every aspect of our relationship. As Valerie went on, I sat there attempting to take in this knowledge, feeling as though the coffee shop was tilting sideways. I was making connections in my head, constructing a schedule. Around New Year's, Maria began working at Dominic Company. She and I had briefly met at the March workplace holiday party. By that point, Dominic had already started to behave differently, becoming more aloof, checking his phone more, and hanging out with coworkers more. What I had dismissed as his major project-related stress suddenly appeared to be something very else. Valerie's eyes filled with tears when I questioned her why she was telling me this rather than shielding her kid. As she revealed more information before Dominic's father departed for Arizona with his coworker, the similarity to her own marital dissolution became evident. Instead of acknowledging the reality, there had been months of estrangement, harsh remarks, and fabricated disputes. She didn't want to watch history repeat itself, with Dominic taking the coward's route and me left in the dark. Suddenly, the bartender's remark made more sense. In addition to drunken ineptitude, there was a covert effort to ruin our relationship so he wouldn't have to make the difficult decision himself. We spoke for more than an hour. Valerie talked further about her personal experience, attempting to keep her marriage intact even after discovering the affair. Before we split up in the parking lot, she scolded herself for not being enough. I've been thinking about what she said ever since. The most difficult thing I've ever learned is that you can't force someone to pick you. Anything in between is only postponing the inevitable. They either do or they don't. After that, I spent a long time sitting in my car and looking at my phone. Dominic has sent 3 fresh SMS. Not a single reference to Maria continuing to conceal the whole truth, despite all the "I'm sorry" and "I love you" variants. Rather than answering him, I asked Lena if I could crash at her house over the phone. She volunteered to pick up dinner on her way home and was already setting up the pull-out sofa without hesitation or inquiry. Everyone deserves a buddy like that in times of trouble. I texted Dominic back at last. I am aware of Maria. Until you are prepared to give me the whole truth, don't get in touch with me again. While you're at work tomorrow, I'll be gathering more of my belongings. I banned his number after that. Only for now, not forever. I wanted time to reflect without his defenses or explanations. Karina phoned the discussion when we were driving to Lena's, verified Valerie's information, and added another layer. Last Thursday, she had heard Paul and Dominic talking about the matter. After the weekend, she approached her brother and forced him to tell me the truth. It was obvious that he had broken his pledge. Despite being Dominic's sister, Karina's steadfast support was what shocked me the most. She made it apparent that she supported me in this matter. I felt a great sense of relief. Over the years, his entire family had grown to be my family, and I had been afraid of losing them as well as Dominic. That night, Lena's flat was just what I needed. A neutral visage that would allow me to simply be myself without having to justify myself. We ate Thai cuisine on the floor of her living room. She was watching a baking competition with papers from her online lesson all over her coffee table. The everyday routine that neither of us actually adhered to was like a life preserver throughout my emotional upheaval. Lena went to bed, but I stayed up and looked through my phone's pictures. 5 years of Dominic memories. Holidays, vacations, and sporadic selfies on typical days. We looked like lottery winners in our engagement pictures. While Dominic was at work packing more things, I was mentally planning my plans for the following day, including going to the apartment and possibly discussing breaking our lease with the landlord. When a text message from an unidentified number buzzed through my phone. "It's Maria here, Margot. I am aware that you blocked Dominic. Is it possible for us to meet tomorrow? You should be aware that there is more to the story. Only the 2 of us." My heart was racing as I gazed at the message for a while. Could there be anything else? And after what seemed like an hour but was probably only minutes, why would this woman want to tell me straight out? I typed a reply. When and where? First, the 3rd update. I appreciate everyone's tremendous support of my earlier posts. You have no idea how much your comments have helped me during the restless nights I've been reading them. I'm surviving. In case you were wondering how I'm doing, there are times when things are simpler than others. When I finally met with Maria, things didn't go as planned. We got together at this small breakfast spot by the park. I suppose it's neutral territory. She was already there, anxiously browsing through her phone when I got there. She didn't look like the person I remembered from the business party. Human, less polished. In some way, she wore very little makeup and had her hair pulled back in an untidy bun. I was instantly taken aback by how uneasy she appeared. Shouldn't she have been more self-assured if she had been having some kind of covert emotional affair with my fiancé? Rather than making eye contact, she continued to fidget with her coffee cup. 2 significant bombshells emerged from the debate. First, Maria had no idea Dominic had developed affections for her until Paul mentioned it casually last week. According to her, she and Dominic had worked closely on a project, occasionally messaging about work after hours, but nothing that crossed any boundary from her perspective. She never flirted with him or promoted anything beyond friendship. She showed me their text history. Mostly job things, occasional memes, nothing romantic or indecent. She even had a boyfriend of 3 years who sometimes joined their group for happy hours. The second discovery was concerning Paul. Apparently, he'd been actively stirring things up. Maria had overheard him at work advising Dominic to explore his choices before settling down, specifically addressing her as someone who gets Dominic better than I do. She stated that Paul had been telling everyone at work that Dominic was having cold feet about the wedding, making jokes about him being stuck and losing out on his freedom. By the end of our meeting, I felt strangely peaceful. Maria wasn't the evil I'd envisioned. She was only an innocent bystander who fell victim to Dominic's frailty and Paul's deceit. She mentioned something that stayed with me before we left. You come across as someone who is aware of their value. Don't allow anyone to cause you to doubt it. I came away from that meeting with a fresh outlook and a strategy. Dominic and I were no longer the only ones involved. It was about Dominic's family background, Paul's poisonous influence, and my role in it. After that, I texted Trina to ask if she could help set up a family gathering in her place. Land that is neutral. She accepted right away since I wasn't yet ready to spend time alone with Dominic. That leads me to the supper from yesterday. Everything was put up in Karina's little yet comfortable apartment. She placed an order with the Italian restaurant next to her building. Just salad and noodles, nothing spectacular. Paul came after Valerie. Karina had demanded that he come. And lastly, Dominic, who appeared to have been sleep-deprived for days. The first 20 minutes hurt like hell. As we pushed spaghetti about our plates at Karina's dining table, we engaged in odd small conversation about the weather and Karina's new coffee table. Our lunch was being virtually stolen by the elephant in the room. However, nobody wished to be the first to recognize it. Valerie finally broke the ice by expressing rather clearly that our purpose was to confront the situation and find a solution, not to have a social gathering. The floodgates were unleashed by it. I explained to Paul what I had learned from Maria, paying close attention to his face as I talked. The way it changed from bewilderment to defensiveness told me everything. He attempted to interject, saying he was only trying to protect his friend. However, Karina quickly took him out. For the most part, Dominic sat quietly, gazing at his almost touched spaghetti. When spoken to personally, although he acknowledged that Maria had only been friendly, he had turned it into something more since he was afraid of becoming a father. That remark caused Valerie to wince. Dominic seemed very embarrassed when I mentioned the joke at the bar. He acknowledged that Maria had nothing to do with anything. He was simply acting like a coward. He was being reprimanded by Paul for getting beaten, and rather of defending our relationship, he had said something offensive to appear cool. Dominic claims that my appearance was never a factor. Paul attempted to brush it off as mere man talk. However, Dominic and I were set to tie the knot in 3 months, as Karina reminded everyone. The memory of our impending wedding date and that straightforward remark struck me like a physical blow. The save the date was no longer in effect. The deposit was paid. As it awaited final adjustments, my dress hung in Lena's empty wardrobe. I then subtly said that I no longer believed the wedding was going to take place. There was silence in the room. Dominic began to object, but I interrupted him. I described how I had been attempting to figure out how we got here for the past week. I had come to the realization that this was more than simply Paul's poisonous influence, Maria, or that joke. This has to do with Dominic's dishonesty toward both himself and me. I explained to them that I had been ignoring the warning flags for months, including his increasing time with Paul and his lack of enthusiasm in wedding preparations. He was emotionally detached. It was simpler for me to make excuses than to face the reality. However, I deserved someone who had faith in me, someone who was able to identify their sentiments without the assistance of family members. Valerie and Karina both gave Paul simultaneous shut-up answers after he made a sarcastic remark about my being emotional. Dominic maintained that he was positive he loved me. I'm just afraid of ruining everything. He already has, I pointed out. Hours passed throughout the talk. There were sobs, acrimonious exchanges, particularly between Karina and Paul, and hard realities. We exposed fresh wounds and reopened old ones. Everyone was emotionally spent by midnight, at which point we came to the inescapable conclusion that the wedding was off. We had ended our 5-year relationship. There was no spectacular escape or yelling battle. We both saw that there was a fundamental rift between us. Have faith. It could finally be reconstructed, but not in time for a wedding in October. Not while Maria is still employed by Dominic's business. Not while the reverberation of that joke lingers between us. After that, Karina assured me that this had no bearing on my relationship with Valerie or her, and she drove me back to Luna Place. No matter what happened with Dominic, she said, I was still family to them. Upon returning to Lena's place, I sat in the dark on the pull-out couch and let reality to settle in. After 5 years, the wedding has been canceled. The future is uncertain. It took me a while to weep. Rather, I created a list in the Notes app on my phone call location to contact the visitor to have them vacate the flat and cancel the payment upon return ring. Modify your relationship's social media status. It was past 2 a.m, the moment Lena walked out of her bedroom. She wanted to make sure I was all right after hearing me enter. She just sat next to me in the pullout and wrapped her arm around my shoulders when I told her the wedding was off. That's how we sat till dawn, just existing amid the weirdness of my new reality without saying anything. Dominic texted me this morning to ask if we could get together to talk about practical issues. What to do with the stuff we purchased jointly and the apartment that separates our money. So mature, so definitive. Elliot also sent me a message asking when he might come over and assist me with packing. My mom had somehow gotten beyond the rumors, and my brother, who was usually pragmatic, had a soft spot for her. Most likely from a relative of mine who follows Karina on Instagram and inquired as to whether she need to postpone her wedding journey. My finger feels heavy with the ring now. I've been unconsciously twisting it, a nervous habit I was unaware I had. It has a straightforward diamond pattern set in white gold. Nothing ostentatious or extravagant. Like our relationship, it was classic, which is why Dominic had picked it. I don't miss the irony. This morning, I gave the location a call. The coordinator was tough yet empathetic. This close to the date, the deposit is non-refundable. $8,000 wasted. We reduced our spending on new clothing, dining out, and vacations with the money we had saved for more than a year. At the waist, my pragmatic side flinches. Money is not important to the emotional side at the moment. Karina texted to let us know that she had located a photographer who could be open to transferring our money to a future event. In order to save me the painful discussions and tiny gestures of goodwill that would follow the cancellation, Valerie volunteered to assist contact family members. Paul, predictably, wrote a non-apology text explaining that everything happens for a reason and that I would find someone more suitable. I finally removed it without replying. Maria apologized for the incident and reassured me once more that nothing had transpired between them in a brief message. Ironically, I believe her. In this scenario, she appears to be collateral damage, a handy projection for Paul's manipulation and Dominic's anxieties. The routine reminders, like the wedding planning binder remaining in my tote bag and the Spotify playlist we've been creating together for the celebration, are the most difficult. My laptop's honeymoon research folder, tiny fragments of a deceased tomorrow. I chose to go to work even though Lena advised me to take a day off for mental health. The distraction of taking calls and submitting insurance claims seemed less important than sitting at home, going around Reddit and obsessing over everything. Thankfully, my coworkers have been typical. They're either oblivious to my swollen eyes and missing engagement ring, or they don't know yet. Tomorrow, Dominic and I will meet at a coffee shop to talk about the flat and exchange keys. Since my name appears on the lease and he is permitted to temporarily remain with his cousin, he has consented to move out. Another useful discussion in the process of ending a relationship. I still find it hard to accept that this is actually occurring. We were arguing about songs, receptions, and cake flavors last month. We are currently debating who will keep the PlayStation and allocating the kitchen appliances. Seldom are things cleaner, and I can't stop thinking about something Valerie said over the meal. Excellent. They are typically chaotic, depressing, and complex. She would be aware. After Dominic's father departed, she rebuilt her life and raised her 2 children by herself, ultimately found pleasure once more. You wouldn't guess if you looked at her now. She endured a really terrible experience. Perhaps that holds out hope. I'm taking things day by day for the time being. I'll take care of the flat and money tomorrow. I'll start looking for a place of my own next week. Beyond that, the future is hazy, but it does exist. I just received a text from Karina asking if we might get coffee together this weekend. She said that if I need a mental retreat, her family friend, Kenzo, an elderly guy who has known their family for ages, donated his holiday cottage. Although unexpected, Dominic's family's support is much valued. I'm not sure if I'll accept Kenzo's offer yet. A part of me wants to get away to somewhere peaceful so I can think things out. Another part of me is aware that I now need my support network. Lena, with her realistic empathy. Elliot, with his great brotherly protectiveness. Even the complex loyalties of Karina and Valerie. I am aware that I will no longer be using my wedding countdown app. I won't be practicing a new signature using Dominic's last name or tying reception to fundamental concepts. I don't know what will happen next, but I'm beginning to think that something will happen now, that future is gone. Last update. Writing this last update for my new flat feels weird. 3 months have passed since the family meal that called off my engagement. I spent 3 months putting my life back together in unexpected ways. Here is the update that several of you requested in your mails. The unexpected, the negative, and the positive. Let's start with the useful things. Within a week following our split, Dominic left our shared flat. While he was at work, Elliot and Lena assisted me in packing up his belongings, which I left in the living room with labels clearly marked for him to pick up. It felt strange to divide 5 years of life together into his and mine. The throw blanket I had purchased on our weekend getaway to that small mountain village, and the coffee machine he had received for his birthday. We had framed pictures on each wall. After a while, the flat felt empty, more like a stage than a house. Before the leasing manager let me to terminate the agreement with an additional month's payment, I stayed there for 2 more weeks. To get away from the ghost of our relationship that haunted every place was worth the money. It was more difficult than anticipated to find a new location. Right now, the rental market is fierce. And as a single person, my budget is much more constrained. I eventually moved to a smaller 1-bedroom apartment across town, farther from my place of employment, but it had a little balcony where I began growing herbs in pots from the dollar shop. In spite of everything, the mint is flourishing, but the basil keeps withering. I decide to view it as symbolic. It's been a financial adjustment. Suddenly, I was responsible for all of our joint costs. Cooking for one makes everything appear more costly, including groceries, streaming services, and auto insurance. I've turned into the type of person who records spending in a spreadsheet, utilizes coupons and store brands, and reconsiders ordering takeout. I never imagined having to learn these things at the age of 29. Surprisingly, the wedding providers were sympathetic. Although they held our money, the venue wrote me a kind message wishing me luck. Despite their no refund clause, the florist reimbursed half of our money. His brother, who works at a therapeutic facility, was suggested by the DJ. An unanticipated yet kind act. I have the engagement ring in its original box in my dresser drawer. Dominic told me that taking it back was bad karma and that I should either keep it or sell it. I'm still undecided on what to do with it. There are days when I forget it exists. On other days, I open the box and gaze at it, wondering how such lofty promises could have been symbolized by something so tiny. Social media was a unique hell in and of itself. I feared the barrage of inquiries, so I waited 2 weeks before updating my relationship status. At 2 a.m., I eventually completed it on a Tuesday. In any case, the notifications kept coming in. I posted a short, ambiguous statement about mutual decisions and requesting privacy, then muted notifications and threw my phone across the couch. Well-meaning friends with their "what happened" messages from distant relatives offering prayers, former classmates I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly slid into my direct messages with faux concern that felt more like curiosity. Later, with the caption "New Beginnings," the first shared a single picture of my new apartment keys. My engagement announcement received fewer likes, but in some ways it seemed more sincere. Let's talk about Dominic now. Since the split, we've chatted a few times, primarily on practical issues like shared cloud storage accounts and letters that arrived at the incorrect address. We neglected to part ways, giving a sister back an air fryer that was borrowed. Like acquaintances compelled to strike up a conversation in an elevator, each exchange has been polite but tense. He continues to work for the same firm and maintains his friendship with Paul, despite recent arguments. According to Karina, his cousin's house is still where he lives. The grapevine, also known as Karina, claims that following our breakup, things with Maria became awkward. Since finding out the whole truth, she has been aloof toward him and asked to switch to a new squad. Dominic's text message last month asking if we could meet was the biggest surprise. Since we hadn't met in person since exchanging keys at the apartment, I was a little curious about his desires. As Lena half-jokingly recommended, we met in a coffee shop close to my new location, neutral territory, with many of witnesses. He had deeper shadows under his eyes and a distinct appearance, wearing a clothing that was unfamiliar to me. Small conversation about the weather and work took up the first 10 minutes. He then produced a diary. He continued, "I've been seeing someone," and before he could explain, my heart gave a strange little stutter. "I mean, a therapist?" He used the diary to record his daily therapy reflections on the habits and actions he wished to alter. He had been analyzing how he handled me, his connection with Paul, and his relationship with his father. He made no requests for reconciliation or forgiveness. All he wanted me to know was that he was improving himself. He said, "I should have done this years ago. Perhaps things might have turned out differently." I had never seen him so self-aware, and I honestly hoped that therapy would help him. Not for me, because it seems tiring to carry around that much unresolved familial pain. That ship had gone. He said he had heard I was still close to his mother and sister before we split up. "I'm happy," he said. "They require the company of decent people." One of the most peculiar aspects of this separation has been that Valerie texted me once a week, generally with amusing memes or updates about her garden. While keeping in touch with Dominic's family, every other Sunday, Karina and I get breakfast at this small cafe that is located midway between our apartments. They've taken care to avoid making me feel awkward or giving away too much about Dominic adhering to my boundaries. As for myself, I would want to express that this grief has caused me to have some deep self-discoveries. The messier the reality. There are days when I feel free and pleased that I didn't marry someone who may recklessly harm me. On other days, generally when my hot water heater breaks down or I am unable to reach anything that Dominic would have gotten for me from the top shelf, I long for the pragmatic conveniences of a relationship. I started therapy because I realized how much I compromised in that relationship, not because of the breakup particularly. How many warning signs did I overlook because they were wrapped in familiarity? How much of myself I had sacrificed to accommodate Dominic's desires and fears? My therapist recommended that I recover certain aspects of myself that I had lost along the process. After Dominic often moaned about having to wake up early on the weekends, I started trekking again on Saturday mornings. However, dating again seems like a far-off idea. My coworkers have begun to talk about introducing me to this wonderful man. I'm not ready. They know it. In a few more months, perhaps even longer, I'm still learning how to feel at ease in my own company at the moment. What ought to have been the most depressing chore led to the most surprising outcome. We decided to postpone our honeymoon and instead take a 10-day coastal vacation, renting a little cottage with a water view from the terrace. Not refundable. Naturally. I disregarded the calendar reminder for weeks since I couldn't bear to lose that deposit as well. Then Lena made a bold suggestion. "In any case, make the journey. Alone." She said, "You've never been on a solo trip. Perhaps the moment has come." I was initially frightened by the thought. A lovely cabin intended for 2 people, for 10 days alone. It seemed like the preamble to a depressing independent movie, but the more I considered it, the more I liked it. Without sacrificing anything, I could get up whenever I wanted to explore. If I wanted to, I could read a whole book at once. I'm going to Honeymoon Cottage alone there next week. I downloaded a few podcasts, brought along 3 paperbacks, and indulged in a brand new bikini that I picked out just for comfort, instead of how it seemed to another person. My mother believes I'm insane. I turned down Elliot's invitation to accompany me for a portion of the time. To discover who is out there, Karina advised me to download a dating app. Perhaps, but most likely not. I have no idea what this non-honeymoon will bring. A honeymoon? Clarity, perhaps? Perhaps more inquiries. There's undoubtedly some sunburn. Being aware of my sunscreen luck. Our song was playing on the supermarket speakers the other day when I was grocery shopping. It would have made me hide in the frozen food department and fight back tears 3 months ago. This time, I just had a tiny ache, similar to applying pressure to a largely healed bruise. Advancement, not flawless. I will not claim to be an expert on everything. The shower at my new apartment exhibits strange temperature swings. Yesterday, I destroyed another basil plant. Sometimes, before I remember, I still reach for my phone to text Dominic about something amusing. We no longer do that.